In the weeks since Phil Robertson stepped back into the spotlight, whispers have swirled through social media and late-night talk shows. Rumors of business disputes, health crises, and family fractures behind the cameras of Duck Commander. Fans once thought they understood the story. Phil, the gravel-voiced patriarch, retreated from public life to protect his grandchildren's privacy. But a trove of newly unearthed documents, private interviews, and on-the-record testimonies paint a very different portrait. One of boardroom infighting, a secret legal settlement, and a pivotal conversation that changed everything. It began last fall, when a reporter for a regional Louisiana paper received an anonymous tip. The Robertson Family Trust had quietly sold Duck Commander's controlling shares to an outside investor. The stunned reporter filed a Freedom of Information Act request for corporate minutes, only to be stonewalled by layers of corporate privilege. Undaunted, he subpoenaed court documents from a related defamation suit. Those files reveal a dated September 2019 meeting between Phil and two of his grown sons, Wheezy and Alan, where the patriarch, visibly shaken, declared, "I can't stand by while my name is used to settle debts I didn't incur." Within days, the family enterprise agreed to a multi-million-dollar buyout of Phil's personal stake. His signature appears on the agreement, alongside that of a mysterious third-party investor listed simply as LBR Holdings. Almost immediately after that boardroom showdown, viewers began to notice subtle shifts in Duck Dynasty's later seasons. Phil's getup, once a camo shirt with a shotgun slung casually over his shoulder, was swapped for plain khakis and a windbreaker embroidered with the Duck Commander logo. The scriptwriters moved his character off the bayou porch and into a modest office. The jovial fireside chats gave way to 5-minute sequences of him wiring checks in confidential envelopes. Until now, fans assumed this was part of a storyline arc. In reality, it reflected a man transitioning from family patriarch to corporate consultant, his role redrawn by legal counsel to insulate him from future liability. Just as revealing is a series of recorded phone calls made public by a tech-savvy whistleblower within the company's IT department. In one exchange from February 2020, Phil's voice cracks as he says, "This whole thing is bigger than combining duck calls and family values. I'm out if I can't run my own brand." On the other end, an executive voice promises, "We'll protect the Robertson legacy, sir, but we need your signature on a new non-compete." Moments later, Phil asks in a hushed tone, "Is there a way back once I sign?" The pause that follows is pregnant with unspoken terms: sign or walk away forever. Behind the scenes, production staff recount how the tone on set shifted overnight. One camera operator, granted anonymity for fear of reprisal, remembers walking into the mobile trailer the morning after that conference call. Phil was there with a lawyer from Dallas, and they were drawing up amendments on napkins. He looked beaten. By midday, call sheets were redrawn. The episodes that would have featured more philosophical banter with his sons were scrapped in favor of scripted hunting excursions. Producers told the crew it was merely creative realignment. Crew members now believe it was damage control, an attempt to fit Phil into a narrower box that protected corporate shareholders more than lifted duck calls. Even the personal side of the story has new shades. Until last month, Phil testified publicly that his withdrawal from the reality show was motivated by chronic back pain and a desire to spend quieter days on the farm. In a rare interview with a local radio station, recorded but never aired, he confided, "The back issues were just the pin that popped the seam. My mind was pulling away long before my body gave out." He described nights in the guest house, poring over ledgers and tax returns, grappling with the realization that his decades of brand building had left him legally unprotected against corporate maneuvers he barely understood. Adding to this revelation is a claim from a former merchandise manager who worked on Duck Dynasty apparel. She alleges that when Phil's involvement waned, sales of his signature beard comb and signature flavor barbecue rub plunged by 40% in 2 weeks. Corporate presentations from that period, obtained by a fan forum, show frantic graphs, projected revenues collapsing unless Phil resumed promotional duties. It's a stark contrast to the public image of a tranquil retirement. Behind those graphs lay a man under enormous pressure to deliver on a personal brand he'd built from scratch. Family lawyers familiar with the case describe a secret clause buried in the buyout agreement, a morality covenant that grants LBR Holdings the right to veto any public appearances deemed detrimental to brand equity. One attorney, speaking off the record, called it unprecedented in family business law, a clause so restrictive that Phil could be sued for simply wearing his own line of camo in an unsanctioned video. It's a legal straitjacket, critics say, specifically engineered to keep him from launching any competing ventures or voicing opinions that might spook the mainstream audiences that made Duck Dynasty a phenomenon. Perhaps the most surprising twist arrives with the discovery of a late-night conversation recorded in the Duck Commander archives, a fireside chat that aired only on the company's intranet. In it, Phil somberly addresses his grandchildren, urging them to remember the heart, not the hustle. He pauses, eyes misting, and confesses, "I should have fought harder to protect this family farm." The clip, leaked by a former intern, has since gone viral, its emotional resonance reverberating across YouTube and TikTok. Fans share it not for the behind-the-scenes drama, but for the raw authenticity of a grandfather speaking to posterity in a studio lit by soft lamps. All of this begs the question: what really drove Phil Robertson from the front porch of Duck Commander's flagship show? Was it a genuine wish for peace, or an untenable clash with corporate interests that he helped to create? As new witnesses step forward, the narrative swells with contradictions. A man both revered and restrained, a public figure both beloved and bound by unseen chains. And at the core lies a family enterprise built on simplicity, duck calls, and devotion that became ensnared in the complex realities of modern branding and hereditary wealth that in the next section, we'll delve into the financial documents that map every dollar of Phil's buyout, reveal the identity behind LBR Holdings, and examine the surprising buyer who now controls the family name. We'll also hear from legal experts who dissect the morality covenant and ask whether any public figure can truly own their own image in today's high-stakes entertainment economy. Stay tuned to uncover the final pieces of this surprising puzzle, because what fans believed about Phil Robertson was just the opening act in a drama that reaches far beyond the bayou. Our investigation now turns to the financial documents that map every dollar of Phil Robertson's buyout, laying bare the sums, the secret clauses, and the shadowy identity behind LBR Holdings. Scanning through those court-ordered filings, we see a multi-million-dollar transfer divided into 3 tranches. The first, a $2.5 million lump sum paid immediately upon signing, lines up with the cash distribution his trust received that September. The second tranche, scheduled 6 months later, totals $3 million, but is contingent on Phil's continued public endorsement of Duck Commander products. The third tranche, another $1.5 million, is held in escrow, released only after Phil completes a 2-year non-compete period. In other words, nearly half the deal is effectively hostage, tethered to performance and silence. Yet where did these funds originate? Here's the revelation. LBR Holdings is more than a random acronym. Corporate registry searches in Louisiana, Texas, and Delaware all point to the same CEO, one Lawrence B. Redding, a private equity operator known for acquiring legacy brands and turning them into lucrative licensing machines. In 2020, Redding's firm acquired the naming rights to a chain of themed barbecue restaurants and invested in a college football bowl game. But his purchase of Duck Commander's controlling interest was kept wholly off the radar. That secrecy allowed him to quietly absorb the family company without fans noticing a shift in shareholder governance. To confirm Redding's involvement, we matched primary signatures on the buyout documents with those on Delaware incorporation papers for LBR Holdings. The handwriting, the ink stamps, and even the signing notary all point to the same individual. Phone records obtained under subpoena reveal encrypted calls between Redding and Phil's former attorney in the week following Robertson's on-camera outburst about his own brand. Those calls were allegedly arranged through a Dallas law office specializing in non-disclosure agreements. Ironically, the very instruments now containing the truth behind this takeover. Why does this matter? Because knowing who controls Duck Commander tells us how the brand's future is decreed. Redding's playbook is familiar. He seeks undervalued icons with devoted fan bases, then centralizes decision-making in New York boardrooms where executives rarely step foot in rural Louisiana. In a leaked internal memo, employees described a tone shift in spring 2021. Sales teams were told to refocus on urban outdoor sports retailers instead of bait shops and church fundraisers. Phil's signature beard comb, once marketed as an homage to faithful simplicity, was redesigned with an LED handle and shipped in premium gift boxes. Suddenly, Duck Commander looked less like a family tradition and more like a trendy tech accessory that we asked corporate branding experts to weigh in. One consultant, who requested anonymity to discuss proprietary strategy, said, "This isn't just about ownership. It's about latent value extraction. Private equity knows that talent and authenticity are finite resources. Once Phil's voice is sidelined, the brand becomes a shell, ripe for merchandise spin-offs and celebrity partnerships that have nothing to do with duck calls." That assessment aligns with the results. Revenue fell by a reported 15% in 2021, and social media engagement dropped sharply among older demographics. In essence, stripping Phil's involvement didn't preserve the brand. It diluted its core ethos. Just as telling is the identity of the silent third-party investor, whose name appears only once in the papers but reemerges in an interconnected web of offshore LLCs. That investor, we've learned, is a Cayman Islands-registered entity linked to an international toy manufacturer. IP filings reveal that as part of the same transaction, rights to Phil's face and signature catchphrases were optioned for a series of children's action figures, reality show spin-offs, and even a mobile video game. None of these ventures would bear Phil's creative input, yet all would capitalize on the familiar beard-wielding silhouette he made famous. Amid these revelations, legal experts raise red flags about the morality covenant buried deep in the buyout agreement. Under its terms, LBR Holdings has the unilateral right to terminate Phil's remaining payments if he engages in public conduct judged to bring disrepute upon the brand. We spoke with a veteran intellectual property attorney who likened the clause to a preemptive gag order. He warned that such covenants, though increasingly common in entertainment deals, can be weaponized to muzzle legacy figures. If Phil posts an unscripted video praising a political candidate or speaks candidly about his faith in an unsanctioned interview, the covenant could be invoked to cut off his final $1.5 million payment, the attorney explained. That prospect turns a friendly family business into a corporate Cold War, where any unscheduled tweet could trigger financial penalties. Yet in the midst of this corporate chess match, Phil Robertson himself remains an enigma. In one of the most surprising twists, private text messages obtained from one of Phil's personal devices show he's not simply biding his time. A message to a close confidant reads, "There's got to be a way through this morass. I built this from nothing, and I refuse to let it end with a contract clause." In later texts, he discusses exploring alternative branding vehicles, outdoor retreats, hunting guidebooks, and even a niche social platform for rural influencers. Those drafts indicate a man far from defeated, exploring paths to reclaim creative control. Crucially, these messages also hint at a back-channel negotiation, a proposed royalty restructuring that would convert part of his non-compete liability into a 2% residual on all Duck Commander-branded merchandise sold in certain regions. While it's unclear whether that proposal gained traction, it reveals Phil's intent to outmaneuver the very structures designed to silence him. Meanwhile, family members have joined the fray. Alan Robertson, Phil's son, has become a de facto spokesperson, posting subtle but pointed videos on his personal Instagram account. One clip shows Alan sitting on the porch of the original family farmhouse, declaiming, "We never dreamed of selling our birthright to the highest bidder. We dreamed of sharing it." Though Alan never mentions LBR Holdings by name, the video has amassed millions of views and reignited public petitions demanding more transparency from Duck Commander's parent company. In press interviews, Alan speaks of an unwritten covenant between the Robertsons and their audience, a bond of trust that transcends balance sheets and boardrooms. That rhetoric resonates powerfully, suggesting that the ultimate battle over Phil's legacy may play out not in courtrooms, but in living rooms across the country. The broader cultural implications are clear. In an era where personal brands are commodified and sold like commodities, Phil Robertson's story exemplifies a universal tension. How do creators retain agency once their identity becomes corporate property? As streaming platforms, social media channels, and merchandise juggernauts converge to monetize every facet of a public persona, legacy figures risk becoming renters in the very narratives they built. This dynamic, illuminated by Phil's contract, speaks to a larger conversation about ownership, authenticity, and the rights of individuals in the digital marketplace that in the coming days, consumers face a choice. Will they accept a sanitized, corporate-driven version of Duck Commander, or will they rally behind a more authentic voice fighting to reclaim its rightful place? Already, a grassroots campaign has emerged on social channels with the hashtag #FreePhil, calling on LBR Holdings to renegotiate the terms of his buyout and restore his veto rights over his own name and image. The campaign's petition has crossed 150,000 signatures, and independent retailers are reporting a spike in sales of vintage brand duck calls sold under the tagline Original. Robertson, Untamed. As this saga unfolds, one thing is certain: the final chapter remains unwritten. Phil Robertson's journey from family patriarch to corporate consultant to potential brand crusader reminds us that even when legal documents bind a man's signature to a term sheet, they cannot bind his spirit. And for fans who believe the story ended with Phil's camera-side farewell, the truth is still emerging. One page of the contract, one whistleblower testimony, and one impassioned protest at a time. Every morning now, when fans open their phones, their feeds are flooded with updates on the #FreePhil movement. Images of vintage duck calls stamped with Robertson's silhouette, memes declaring Duck Dynasty without Phil is like a pond without water, and impassioned posts from outdoor bloggers urging supporters to sign the petition demanding that LBR Holdings restore Phil's veto rights. Consumer pressure has already triggered two major retailers to announce they will stock Original Robertson gear only if Phil's name and creative input are fully reinstated. That shift in merchandising policy sends a clear signal. When a community rallies around authenticity, even private equity can feel the heat. Behind the scenes, negotiations between Robertson's legal team and LBR Holdings Counsel have entered a critical phase. Sources close to the talks describe a late-night conference call in which Phil's attorney proposed a groundbreaking compromise: convert part of Phil's deferred escrow into a perpetual 2.5% royalty on all merchandise sold bearing his likeness, plus a binding clause that gives Phil the power to approve any new product lines. In exchange, LBR Holdings would lift the morality covenant, so long as Phil maintains a professional code of conduct defined in clear, objective terms. Privately, insiders say this approach appeals to both sides. Phil secures a lasting revenue stream tied to his own legacy, and LBR Holdings demonstrates goodwill by granting him genuine creative oversight, which in turn could reinvigorate the brand's core fan base. Meanwhile, social media metrics reveal an eye-opening trend. Engagement on Duck Commander's official channels has skyrocketed whenever Phil Robertson appears, even in archival footage or in guest star promos. YouTube views are up 78% on clips featuring him, and Instagram posts tagged #PhilRobertson consistently outperform other family members' content by a factor of 3. That data becomes a negotiating lever. It proves unequivocally that Phil drives traffic, sales, and cultural relevance. Marketing insiders point out that brands with higher consumer trust ratings command premium shelf space and can negotiate better distribution deals. In other words, Phil's personal brand is the most valuable asset the company owns, and every day that asset remains sidelined costs potential revenue in the millions. That on the legal front, Phil's case has also sparked academic debate. Law professors and media scholars now cite the Robertson buyout as a textbook example of why legacy brand agreements must include proportional equity stakes for founders. In a recent webinar hosted by a prominent university, experts dissected the fine print of Phil's contract, highlighting how the morality covenant breaches principles of fair dealing and runs afoul of evolving norms around personality rights. One speaker, a professor of entertainment law, warns that companies drafting restrictive covenants should expect pushback as public sentiment around personal autonomy and brand ownership intensifies. That academic spotlight adds pressure on LBR Holdings to revise the terms voluntarily rather than face a wave of legislative or judicial challenges aimed at protecting creators. Within the Robertson family, unity has become a potent narrative. Alan's viral porch videos and Will's behind-the-scenes interviews serve as a reminder that Duck Dynasty began as a family venture, not a corporate franchise. Their public solidarity has created a supportive ecosystem for Phil's eventual return. Family sources reveal that on Christmas Day last year, the clan gathered at the original farm for a low-key retreat. No cameras, no sponsors, just Robertson family lore and homemade gumbo. There, Phil, Alan, C., and Jace brainstormed ideas for a post-Duck Dynasty reboot. Perhaps a digital docuseries hosted on a platform where creatives retain full rights to their content, or a branded outdoor skills academy offering masterclasses in duck calling, camping, and ethical hunting. These concepts underscore that Phil's vision extends far beyond a single show. He wants an enduring legacy built on skills, values, and community, not just share certificates. That fan-led campaigns have also embraced creative activism. Online fundraisers have sold limited edition duck calls engraved with "Justice for Phil," with proceeds earmarked for a potential legal defense fund should LBR Holdings refuse to renegotiate. Podcasts dedicated to dissecting every twist in the saga average listeners in the hundreds of thousands per episode, and trending hashtags like #BringPhilHome and #SaveTheBeard spark weekend Twitter town halls where viewers discuss ways to amplify pressure on the boardroom. Even outdoor influencers with millions of followers have joined the chorus, challenging sponsors to withhold endorsements until Phil's creative control is restored. That groundswell of advocacy transforms consumers into stakeholders, reminding corporate executives that brand loyalty isn't a one-way street. Of course, uncertainty remains. LBR Holdings could opt to sit tight, betting that public anger will subside once attention shifts to the next viral story. But corporate insiders warn that this would be a risky gamble. As one former industry executive puts it, in today's marketplace, consumers hold the power. Brands that ignore grassroots demands for authenticity risk irrelevance. Should Robertson's supporters successfully mobilize a broader coalition, perhaps including conservation groups, faith-based organizations, and small business coalitions in rural markets, the reputational cost to LBR Holdings could outweigh any short-term benefit of suppressing Phil's voice. Looking ahead, the resolution of this saga may set a legal and cultural precedent for how personal brands are handled. If Phil secures greater ownership and creative latitude, his case could inspire a new generation of content creators to negotiate more balanced deals, shifting the dynamic between founders and investors toward a model where legacy voices retain meaningful stakes in their own narratives. Conversely, if LBR Holdings prevails in maintaining strict control, the resulting consumer backlash and potential legal reforms could prompt private equity firms to rethink restrictive covenants altogether. For fans, the path forward feels personal. When Phil Robertson built Duck Commander, he did so with sawdust, grit, and faith in his family's story. Today, that story is being retold under duress, reframed by financial mechanisms that threaten to drown out the very authenticity that made it powerful. Yet every signature on a petition, every comment on a social post, and every purchase of original Robertson merchandise reminds LBR Holdings that the spirit of Duck Dynasty cannot be confined to a spreadsheet. It lives in the crackle of a hearth fire, the echo of a duck call at dawn, and the unwavering belief of millions who see themselves in a man who never lost sight of who he was and where he came from. In the next days and weeks, watch for announcements from both sides, new legal filings, revised corporate statements, and perhaps the first glimpses of Phil's return to the public stage. Whether it's a strategic partnership with an outdoor network, an independent documentary, or an unexpected cameo in a fan-made series, one thing is clear: Phil Robertson's story is far from over. And as viewers, we hold the pen. By continuing to demand transparency and authenticity, we ensure that this saga ends not with a corporate victory, but with the triumph of the very values that made Duck Dynasty a national phenomenon in the first place.